Every life is precious, and every life has a purpose. If that's the case, why execute an innocent man?
You are now listening to The Infamous Ones, a true crime podcast hosted by Kay on Spotify. A podcast aimed to uncover and share the stories behind heinous and insane acts that have been overlooked or overshadowed by mainstream media, getting justice for the voices that can't speak.
What's up, y'all? It's your girl Kay, and I am the host of The Infamous Ones, a true crime podcast. A podcast designed to focus on crimes committed in the Black community that you don't hear about in mainstream media, giving a voice to those victims that have otherwise been silenced. Y'all, we are officially in season 2. That's right, season 2. What it do? Yes. Okay, y'all. I know it's a podcast and everything, and I know it plays straight through, but damn, y'all. I kind of like the sound of season 2. Like, I like the idea of having seasons. So don't judge me, judge your mammies. Okay. We are 25 episodes in. I can't believe it. We're about to be on the 1 year mark. I was trying so freaking hard to get an episode every week. I think I found a way to make that happen. But y'all, life be lifing, and I appreciate all of those that rock with me, that send me the encouraging messages and everything. I think I found a way to get back to the weekly episodes like I was doing before, but we are 25 episodes in. It's been a journey, but in the words of Celie after she freed herself from Mr. in the Color Purple, dear God, I'm here. So thank you to all of those that have been rocking with me through the good, the bad, the ugly, the in between, all of that. Okay. I hope that in this season that there are more streams, more listens, and of course, more reviews. And yes, I know I said that I was disbanding the discussion group. It is still active. Even though I said I was going to get rid of it, I know a lot of y'all hit me up in my inbox and, emails and everything. Y'all were like, yo, we don't want it to go away. Now, I will say, if you notice, a lot of people have been kicked out of that group. So if you're not active, like, seriously, what the hell are you there for? Like, really, it's just that simple. If you're going to be in the discussion group, keyword discussion, just saying. So, for those of you that are still here in the private discussion group, thank you. I would much rather have 10 or 15 of y'all that are actually active than 300 of y'all that just sit there every week and don't say shit. So, thank you for those that do. Now, with that being said, I am so excited for this new season. I've got some new cases, crazy stories, and I mean crazy stories, new episodes. I've got some great new liquors and wines that I want to try, some really good snacks, of course, because y'all know how I am about my snacks. Oh, and I got merch. Yes, I've got infamous shirts and mugs, bags, and everything. I'll drop the email later with how to order, because you got to actually order through the Facebook group, the discussion group. Yeah, yeah. Y'all see what I did there? Yeah. In order to get the merch, you got to be in the discussion group. But I am so excited for everything that is in store. Oh, speaking of store, y'all, I went and got this bottle of wine. Ooh, Jesus Devonte Christ. It is so good. So it's called Red Decadence Chocolatier. It's kind of a cheaper wine, but it tastes so good. Like, I got a feeling I'm about to be buzzed tonight. Okay. Like, I took a sip of it and I swear I felt like I was eating one of those chocolate Tootsie Pops. That's how good it was. So, y'all know I got my popcorn and junior mints tonight to get me through the episode. I need to know what y'all are sipping on. What happened? When y'all are leaving these reviews, y'all know y'all supposed to tell me what y'all sipping on so that way I can try something new. Y'all leaving your girl hanging. Like, come on now. Anyway, y'all ready to get into it? Y'all know what time it is. Let's get it. This week's case is a special one that a lot of people have sent me emails and messages on. It's something that I've been following for a while now. This week's case involves Felicia Picus, victim, Laura Asaro, informant and Marcellus's girlfriend, Henry Cole, Marcellus's cousin and cellmate, Glenn Roberts, Marcellus's grandfather's best friend and I guess you could say witness, and Marcellus Williams, the infamous murderer. Or was he? Marcellus Williams was born December 30th, 1968, in South Bend, Indiana. Now, I couldn't find much on his parents, let alone their names, but what I did learn was that Marcellus grew up in a very, kind of struggling environment. His father wasn't around. His father was a war veteran, but basically abandoned him and his two brothers. So his mom was left to take care of all of them, much like, a lot of single moms. Shout out to the single moms whose, baby daddies have bailed and they holding it down. But he ends up losing one of his brothers at an early age. And, he turned to drugs and was really having a hard time just, getting through life. Like he's really struggling. He's getting through life trying to get it together, but he's struggling. He can't turn away from the drugs, messing with wild women, all kinds of stuff. The one good thing that he had was his son, Marcellus Williams Jr. Now, I did not say who Marcellus's mom was. I don't think that it was the girlfriend because, yeah, I didn't see that happening. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Marcellus had his share of, I guess you could say, financial issues. He was working dead end jobs and hanging around the wrong people. In July of 1998, he decided that he and some other individuals were going to try to rob a donut shop. Now, I couldn't find much on it, but I know he didn't get caught right away. Plus, I kind of wanted to focus on like the main reason for this case. I didn't want to focus on the whole donut shop robbery. So, on August 11th, 1998, Marcellus asks his grandfather, Walter Hill, can he borrow his car? So his grandfather said, yeah. And, he let him borrow his dark blue Buick LeSabre to run some errands. Now, it's said that a lot of times Marcellus slept in his car. I don't know how true this is, but that's what some of the court documents were saying. So Marcellus borrows the car and he drops his girlfriend Laura Asaro off to her mother's house around 8:30 that morning, and then he drives the car to this bus stop and he decides to catch a bus to University City. Now, Marcellus was really needing money, so he was trying to find a house to break into. So he leaves the car by the bus stop and he catches the bus. And once he gets off the bus to University City, he decides that he's just going to go to a random neighborhood and break into a house. So he comes across the Ames Place neighborhood, which is like this gated community, and he goes to Kingsbury Boulevard. Now, with the gated community, cars couldn't get in or out, but of course, people could walk through no problem. So he stumbles on the 6900 block of Kingsbury Lane onto the house of Felicia Gale Ann Picus. Felicia Gale Ann Picus was born February 6th, 1956, to George and Veronica Gale. She was the second of eight children. Ooh, Jesus. She had five brothers: William, Sanford, Andrew, Samuel, and Christopher. And she had two sisters, Sydney Beth and Emily. She got her journalism degree from the University of Illinois. She married Daniel Picus, which was her childhood sweetheart. He was a radiologist at Barnes Jewish Hospital. They were married for like 18 years. So, they were in it for the long haul. This wasn't no, fly by night. She worked for the St. Louis Post Dispatch, which was a newspaper in St. Louis, Missouri, from 1981 to 1992 as a reporter. And in 1992, she resigned and became a volunteer and an advocate for the disadvantaged. She tutored children and, doing the fighting for all the different social causes. Like she was really out there on the scene. Her boss, Ellen Gardner, or her former boss, said that Felicia, AKA, she went by Leisha. Leisha was small in size, but she had a really big heart, and she wasn't afraid to stand up for what she believed in. Now, Leisha was a little itty bitty thing because she was all but like 5'1", but she had this really long, pretty hair, and everybody knew her by her Birkenstocks. Yo, I rocks with that. I love Birkenstocks. I know it's weird and like very grungy kind of, but I like Birkenstocks. Anyway, she was liked, like well liked pretty much by anybody that she worked with, the staff. She worked a lot with the police. Pretty much everybody said that she was a very sweet and genuine person. She had really gotten close to this one family who was kind of like struggling, and they had three daughters. She would take the daughters to the symphony, bake cookies with them, tutor them, all of that. She was even there for their family when one of the daughters was killed in a car accident. So, that tells you what type of person that she was. She was described as somebody that was very sensitive to others. And, she was one of those people that could see the good in people no matter what. Like, no matter what you did, she's going to try to find the positive. She's going to try to find a way to spin it to make you a good person. Baby, she better than me because some people on this planet, I just want to give a giant fuck you because ain't no good in you. You know what I'm saying? But you got good people on the planet like her. One of her last letters to reporters stated, "Evil likes to sniff out a person's weakness and attack from there." That's some deep stuff. On the morning of August 11th, 1998, Felicia had gotten up early to go for a run. When she was done, she stopped by her neighbor's house for a bit and visited. Hey, girl, what's going on? All of that. And then she headed home for a shower. Now, around this time, Marcellus had gotten off the bus and had started looking into the neighborhood. Now, Felicia's house had this big holly tree in the front yard and it blocked the view of her front door. So people suspect that this is why Marcellus chose her house. So he walks up to her door and he knocks, but she's upstairs in the shower, so nobody answers. So he goes to a window pane near the front door, breaks the window with a chip hammer, then reaches in and unlocks it and goes inside of the house. So Felicia is still upstairs in the shower, and Marcellus goes upstairs to the second floor, and he can actually hear the water running. Now, this is where I feel like this is so much bullshit because it states that according to prosecution, Marcellus heard Felicia in the shower, went downstairs, rummaged through her kitchen, found a large butcher knife, and then just waited for her to get out of the shower. So Felicia is in the shower. She hears the footsteps and she gets out of the shower and she calls out, "Hello? Is somebody there? Who's there?" So she throws on a purple shirt and she heads downstairs. And Marcellus is downstairs with this knife, just waiting. And he's not making any noise. Like this entire time that she's been in the shower, he's waiting. But she goes down the stairs and Marcellus is standing by this mirror. And he's like, "Oh shit, if I can see her, then that means she can see me." So he grabs her and just attacks her and starts stabbing her and cutting her. He stabs her in the right forearm, tearing off like a large piece of her flesh and showing her bone. And he's just stabbing and cutting her. And Felicia, she's screaming, "Help! Help! Oh God! Mama, help!" That's what they said. They said she was screaming for her mother. So she falls to the floor. All the while, Marcellus is still stabbing her. And then he thrusts the butcher knife into her neck up to like the hilt of it. So he twists the knife until he heard a bone pop, bending the blade in the process. Now, the knife is lodged in her neck and she's like convulsing for a few minutes before she dies. Now, this is what was said. Okay. It was said that Marcellus stabbed Felicia a total of 43 times with 16 stab wounds, seven of which were fatal. She was stabbed in the neck, her chest, and her face. But the fatal stab wound was the one in her neck because it severed her carotid artery and it fractured her vertebral column, which is like basically like near the spine area. It fucked her up. So she also suffered cut wounds to her nipple, chin, face, knee, thigh, all of that. Like, for lack of better words, Felicia got fucked up. Okay. So after Marcellus sees that Felicia is dead, he's getting what he can and then he dips. So he goes upstairs to her bathroom and he cleans himself up and he sees, like, "Oh shit, I got blood all over me. What the fuck am I going to do?" So He grabs a sweater from one of the drawers that belongs to her husband, Daniel, and he puts that on, but he sees that he still got blood on his boots and his backpack and all of that. So he starts looking for stuff to grab and he sees Daniel's laptop. So he grabs that and the carrying case that came with it, puts it in his backpack. He gets Felicia's purse, puts it in his backpack, and then he just runs out of the house. He catches a bus back to where he parked his grandfather's car. And then he gets in the car and he goes to pick up his girlfriend Laura from her mother's house. Now, there's not much on Laura Asaro initially, except that she had a bit of a history, shall I say, herself with drug addiction. Much like Marcellus, she was struggling. And Laura was also out there selling that hot pocket in them streets. Okay. She was trying to get some coins for that little thing. Okay. Now she did have kids. How many? I'm not 100% sure because this woman was not really liked and there is like literally nothing on her. But her and Marcellus dated for a bit, and that's how the two of them connected. So supposedly, the morning of the murder, Marcellus goes to pick her up. And when she gets in the car, she notices him in this jacket, and she's like, okay, this is a little weird. Like, it's the summertime. Why is this nigga wearing a jacket? Now, y'all got to remember, it's August. And this is like this dude is sitting here wearing a jacket. So when he does take it off, that's when she notices that his shirt has blood like all over it. And he's got these scratches on his neck and all of that. So she asks him, what the hell happened to you? Like, where did all of this blood come from? But he brushes it off and he tells her, oh, it was nothing. I just got into a little fight. You know what I'm saying, baby? I'm good. And so she just kind of dismisses it. So the clothes that he had on were new, but he just decided that he was going to up and, oh, I don't want them no more. So later on that day, he takes the bloody clothes that he had on and he puts them in his handy dandy backpack and he throws it in the sewer. Brand new clothes in the sewer. Okay. Now, maybe I'm just tripping, but if this man killed someone and went up to her bathroom to clean himself up, took the time to go through the drawers and take a sweater or jacket or whatever, don't you think he would have changed completely? Especially since he was getting on a bus all bloody and shit and got blood on his shoes and whatnot. I mean, that would only make sense, right? Like you covered the blood on your shirt. So wouldn't it make sense to say, oh, okay, I got blood on my shoes and shit. Let me change that too. Or, let me put on some different pants or something and make yourself look like, something else. But that's not what happened. Okay. Apparently, it only makes sense in my head. But anyway, so Marcellus takes this backpack that's full of his bloody clothes and he throws it in the drain and it's never seen again. And that same day, Laura, she sees this laptop sitting in the car and she's like, baby, where you get this laptop from? But Marcellus doesn't answer her question. So the next day, Laura gets up and she needs to get some clothes out of her man's trunk. Not your clothes is in the trunk of his car. Okay. So she walks to the trunk of the Buick, and Marcellus is like, fuck. He remembers what's in the trunk because the purse is in the trunk of the car. So he tries to stop her, but she's too quick. So she opens the trunk and she sees this purse and she snatches it up and she hot as fish grease. Marcellus, what the fuck is this? I know you ain't had no bitch in this car. You better not be fucking around on me. Like she starts going through it, trying to get answers, and she finds Felicia's ID. Y'all, this girl turned into Joy from Friday. Like, who the fuck is that bitch? No, ask that bitch for the money. Like that kind of chick. But Marcellus, he's playing it cool. And she's questioning him, who the fuck is Felicia? Where the fuck you get this ID from? And he's just like, baby, it ain't what you think it is. Hell no, I ain't fucking around on you. Nah, girl, that purse belongs to this lady that I killed. I do not believe that nigga just randomly said some shit like that. But okay. So he's like, nah, baby, I needed some money. So, I went to her crib and I tried to break into her house. I ain't know she was home at first, but I heard her in the shower. So, I waited for her in the kitchen and I grabbed a butcher knife and I just waited on her to get out the shower and I killed her. And then when she came downstairs, I stabbed her and I put my hand over her mouth and I just kept stabbing her in the neck and twisting the knife and everything till she died. And Laura, she's floored. She's just in utter shock. And he asks her, like, yo, you want this purse? Like, it's got some good coupons in it. And Laura, she just can't believe what she's hearing. Like, she can't believe that her man is a criminal. She's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you would do that. I don't want anybody's dead person's purse. No, I have to tell the police." Y'all know that's some bullshit. But Marcellus apparently grabs her by the throat and he tells her, like, "Yo, if you tell anybody, I'm gonna kill you and I'm gonna kill your kids and your mama, bitch." And that scares her into silence. So the next day, Laura and Marcellus get in the car and they head over to Glenn Roberts' house. Now, Glenn lived at 5016 Emerson, which was on the same street and in the next block down from his grandfather's house, Walter Hill. Now, Walter Hill was one of Glenn's best friends, and that's where Marcellus sold him the stolen laptop. But he tells Glenn he's selling it for Laura. Now, this is going to be important to remember later on, y'all. Okay. So on August 15th, 1998, Felicia's funeral is held. They hosted it at the university because so many people came to show their respect. She was buried at Willwood Burial Park on Saturday, August 15th in Rockford, Illinois. Now, more time goes by, and I guess Laura wasn't as scared as we thought. They're still together, and Laura is, she's sticking by her man. That's my man, and I'm going to stick beside him. But on August 31st, 1998, Marcellus ends up getting arrested for robbing that donut shop in downtown St. Louis back in July. So he gets booked on September 1st, 1998, and he's sentenced to 20 years and is placed in the St. Louis City Workhouse. Now, this is like a medium security penitentiary located in St. Louis, Missouri. But needless to say, after being sentenced to 20 years, Laura is like, yeah, I ain't gonna hold you, bruh. I ain't gonna be able to do it. I need to move on. She ain't trying to do a bid with nobody. Meanwhile, the cops, they still don't have any leads on who killed Felicia. So while Marcellus is locked up, he ends up rooming with a familiar face, his cousin, Henry Cole. Now, Henry was yet another person that I couldn't really find a lot of information on. Not that it really matters, honestly, but Henry had a sister named Coco, and Coco's daddy was Marcellus's uncle. Now, cousin Henry, he came in around April of 1999, which is about roughly, 6, 7 months after Marcellus got locked up. And while Henry was there, Marcellus is, kicking back. They, chopping it up. They cousins. They catching up. What's going on with the fam? How it been? Damn, homie, you got locked up too. All of that. Henry's been there for about a month. And one day he and Marcellus, they're sitting and watching TV. That's been, like I said, it's been about, roughly about 6, 7 months since Felicia's death. Well, more like 8, 9 months since Felicia's death, but about 6, 7 months since he's been in there. And at this point, her family decided to put out a reward for the capture of the killer. Daniel Pikus, which is Felicia's husband, offers up a $10,000 reward. So Marcellus and Henry, they're sitting there watching TV and they see this. And about 30 minutes after it goes off, Marcellus starts popping off. He bragging and talking about how he pulled it. And Henry's like, nigga, stop lying. You ain't do shit. But Marcellus is adamant. He tells his cousin, "Oh, I did that shit. Yeah, I laid that down. I did that." Now, this is all according to Henry. Okay. So Marcellus is supposedly still harping on it. And Henry's there for, another few weeks. And Henry's like, oh, I can do some things with this money. So he listens to Marcellus talking his big shit. He's telling Henry how Felicia was fighting like a motherfucker. And, oh, yeah, that little bitch was fighting her ass off. And Henry is just secretly taking notes, just waiting on the opportunity. And he didn't have to wait long because on June 4th, 1999, Henry Cole is released from the St. Louis City workhouse. And homie goes straight to the cops, calls the cops in University City. Say, man, listen, I got something to tell y'all. It's about that white lady that's been on TV, that dispatcher chick. I know who killed her. And he tells them everything that Marcellus told him. He's like, listen, this guy that I was rooming with at workhouse, yeah, that's my cousin. His name Marcellus Williams. He told me he the one that did it. Now, according to Governor Mike Parson, Henry starts talking about stuff that happened in the murder that only Marcellus and the authorities knew about. So time is going on, and November 29th, 1999, Laura, his ex, who is newly single because her man is doing time in prison for the donut shop robbery, she's out there and she back on the whole stroll. She back selling that hot pocket, y'all. She got to get some coins. So, she like, hey, $50, you can hit it. One day, though, she get a little sloppy. So she's out there trying to sell her little cookie and whatnot. And she goes and tries to get her some money, but it turns out that the trick she tried to get is a cop. So he arrested her for prostitution and he brings her in. Now, remember, y'all, she is a prostitute, okay? She a hoe. She done been in that jail several times. So he brings her in and she's like, listen, I can't go to jail. I got kids. I can't go to jail, okay? Okay. So, like, check this out. I know you brought me here, but I can help y'all if y'all can help me. I know about that white lady that was killed in University City. And the cops are like, really? What you know about that, Laura? And Laura's like, listen, my ex-boyfriend did it. He told me that he killed her. And the investigators, they come in and they're like, so your boyfriend killed Felicia Picus. She's like real nonchalant. She's like, I mean, I really don't know nothing. I was just saying that because I didn't want to go to jail. But, something about it, the cops just couldn't let go. So they press her a little bit and they're asking her, why would you bring that up? And she tells them, you know what I mean? I told y'all I was just trying to, get out of being arrested. But the cops, they don't believe her. They think she knows something. Like, of all the things for her to bring up, she bring up Felicia's murder. So they decided to press a little bit harder. And the cops are like, well, it's too bad that you don't know anything because, there is a $10,000 reward. Laura's ears perked right the fuck up when she heard that. $10,000 for real? Baby, that's all Laura needed to hear. And y'all know she already thinking of how she gonna spend that money. She knows she can get drugs and all kind of shit. And she can give her little hot pocket a rest in them streets. So she wastes no time in telling them. She was like, listen, my ex-boyfriend, Marcellus Williams, he killed her and he had her purse and stuff in his granddaddy's car. So they're grilling her non-stop. And every time that they ask her to tell them the story of what Marcellus told her story changes. Like there's a lot of inconsistencies, but they don't take that into consideration for whatever fucking reason. They want Marcellus. So on November 18th, 1999, the police go to his grandfather, Walter Hill's house, and they ask to search the Buick LeSabre. And he's like, all right. And they find the post dispatch's ruler and calculator in the glove compartment. So, like, Felicia had a specific ruler and calculator that she used, and it happened to be in the glove compartment. And they're like, bingo, got his ass. So they now have the testimony of both Laura and Henry, and they decide to charge Marcellus Williams. Now, he's been in the city workhouse for over a year when he learns of these new charges. So in January of 2000, Marcellus was charged in the St. Louis County Circuit Court with one count of first degree burglary, one count of first degree murder, one count of first degree robbery, and two counts of armed criminal action for the stabbing death of Felicia Gale Ann Picus. 3 weeks after Marcellus is charged for the murder of Felicia Picus, on January 28th, 2000, he tries to escape prison. He and Matthew Hose had been talking. Matthew Hose was another inmate, by the way. He and Matthew Hose had been talking and they had kind of discussed different plans concerning how they were going to get out and, what to do with the guards and all of that. Now, according to Matthew, Marcellus wanted to kill him. So on the day of the escape attempt, Matthew, Marcellus, and two other inmates are coming back from the wreck into their dorm. Marcellus grabs a metal bar that he got from the workout area and busts one of the guards, this dude named Leslie Harrison, in the head with it. And the guard falls to the ground while the other inmates pick up a table and they try to break out a window, but they were unsuccessful. I don't mean to laugh, but I'm like, do inmates forget that majority of these windows and doors are like bulletproof? So if you try to break it with a table, if a bullet won't get through it, what the fuck make you think a table will? But anyway, I digress. So, Captain Terry Schiller, who was a corrections officer at the St. Louis City Workhouse, he hears the words, officer down, and he comes rushing to the scene. He sees Harrison is bleeding like a stuck pig. So Captain Schiller rushes, he rushes Officer Harrison to the safe area and he like locks him in his office. And he sees Marcellus and everybody still trying to break this window with a table and not having any success with it. So when he steps through the doorway into this multi-purpose room where they are, Marcellus attacks him and tries to hit him with the same iron bar. But Captain Schiller, he quick on his feet. He catches it and he and Marcellus start wrestling. So ultimately, he subdues Marcellus, and obviously, he was not successful in his attempt to escape. So in the jury selection for the trial, the prosecutor at the time, Keith Larner, y'all remember that name? Keith Larner, with his punk ass, had removed 6 qualified Black people that were prospective jurors using the most ridiculous reasons that I have ever heard in my life. Majority of the potential Black jurors were excused for reasons that made no sense, which we all know was because of the fact they were Black. One of the people was excused because of his earrings and clothing. He indicated that he was trying to be different, and Keith Larner was like, "Oh, he's a liberal." Another one was excused because he couldn't really see the difference between life in prison and the death penalty, or like how you weigh or judge something like that. He said he would consider the death penalty, but the rationale given by Keith was that he wasn't definite enough on whether he could consider the death penalty, and also because he was court-martialed while he was in the military for stealing money. Another was excused because he was fired from his job. Like, it was a bunch of dumbass shit. Okay. I'll get more into that later, but yeah, for now, we got to keep going. Okay. So the jury ended up being 11 white people and one Black person. Y'all see where I'm going with this, right? Okay. So his trial begins in 2001 and it's kind of janky from the start. Marcellus got some of the greatest attorneys. Okay. He's got Lawrence Comp, Lane Cardarella, who they let it be known like, we are fighting for you. Larry was the supervisor of the Capital Habeas Unit in the Office of the Federal Public Defender for the Western District of Missouri. Now, if you remember, I was telling you about Glenn Roberts. He was the one that purchased the stolen laptop that Marcellus brought him. Glenn was one of the key witnesses in the prosecution case. But the courts wouldn't let the defense ask any of the questions that they wanted to ask him, which was disappointing because there was one key thing that Glenn said that I truly believe helped the defense and not the prosecution, which is why I think they would not let them ask that question. In his testimony, Glenn said that Marcellus was selling the laptop to him on behalf of Laura. And that was kind of pretty pertinent information. But the trial court wouldn't allow him to testify on hearsay statements. The defense is, they're trying to argue that this information is admissible under the rule of completeness. So the courts think about it and they decide that the rule of completeness did not apply because the state had not elicited any testimony concerning like out of context statements Marcellus had made. Surprise, surprise. Anything that can help the defense at this point just kind of seemed to be problematic. So this is what happens with Glenn when he takes the stand. Okay. Glenn takes the stand and the prosecution starts in on him. Like, they're like, let me direct your attention to August of 1998. Did the defendant, Marcellus Williams, pawn a laptop computer to you? First of all, like, this motherfucker, like, they talking like this dude had a pawn shop. This is an individual, but okay. So they're like, did the defendant, Marcellus Williams, pawn a laptop computer to you? And Marcellus's attorney is like, objection, Your Honor." Oh, oh, that damn, my bad. Got a little ahead of myself. Go ahead. So Glenn answers the question. He says, as to that date, I couldn't testify to that date, but at some point that sounds pretty close. I guess it was like collateral. I gave him some money. He was supposed to come back and get the computer. The prosecutor says, all right. So Glenn goes on and he says, in relationship to the money, it was financial. He said he had financial difficulties or something. And the prosecution looks and they say, well, how much money did you give him? And Glenn says, I mean, I can't remember exactly. It was like 150 or $250. And they say, okay, well, in return, what did he give you? And Glenn shrugs. And he was like, nothing. And the prosecutor is like, damn, I asked the wrong question. He said, all right, well, let me rephrase that. What piece of property did he give you? And Glenn is like, oh, I mean, it was a laptop computer. But the prosecution wanted to make sure the entire courtroom heard it. So they're like, I'm sorry, can you speak up, sir? And Glenn repeats himself and he was like, it was a laptop. So the prosecution, they keep going and they ask, is this man that gave you the laptop right here? And they point, and Marcellus's attorneys object again. And they're like, Your Honor, he said he pawned it. So the prosecutor is only asking questions describing how Glenn came into possession of the laptop. He did not ask Glenn about any statements that Marcellus made to him. In fact, when Glenn tried to tell the courts what Marcellus said, the prosecution ended up objecting. They ended up objecting. They were like, why did you want the laptop? And Glenn answers basically, he was saying he was having financial, and the prosecution shut it down. They were like, I ain't ask you what he was saying. I asked you, but defense, they own it too. They was like, nah, Your Honor, the witness should be able to answer the question. But the judge ends up siding with the prosecution and tells Glenn, and the defense, he has the opportunity to object that it is not responsive. The objection is sustained. Please just answer the question that is directly asked of you. Dumbass shit. They knew that Glenn had some evidence that would help him, but y'all see how they played it. Now, of course, the prosecution tries to use Marcellus's escaped attempt as well in the trial as an admission of guilt. So the defense is trying to argue that the evidence should be excluded because it was inadmissible evidence of uncharged crimes. Basically, because he escaped, it didn't mean, or tried to escape, it didn't mean that he was feeling guilty about Felicia's murder. Hell, he already had 20 years on him for the donut shop robbery. Of course he gonna try to escape. That's 20 fucking years. But the courts denied it because they weren't really on the defensive side anyway. So the defense then tried to file a motion to suppress, stating that the evidence that was found in the Buick was seized during a legal search warrant, and that the police relied on the consent of Marcellus's grandfather, Walter Hill. But Walter Hill said he never gave the authorities the consent to search his vehicle. But of course, the police were like, well, if we got probable cause, we can search without a warrant. And again, the courts decided that, they were going to side with the prosecution and the motion to suppress was denied. And if that wasn't bad enough, almost a month before Felicia's murder, another woman, Deborah McLean, was stabbed over 20 times in her home in Pagedale, which is another like St. Louis community in the suburbs. It's about 3 miles from where Felicia and Daniel's residence was. Now, Dr. Mary Case was the St. Louis County medical examiner. She believed that the murders were connected. She feels like Marcellus was responsible for that one as well, but she just couldn't prove it. And because Marcellus had a prior extensive, like, criminal record, that's what she was basing it on. But luckily, they couldn't charge him for that crime. So, after a long trial, both parties rest and the jury is dismissed to deliberate. It took them about 5 hours, but they came back and they find Marcellus Khalifa Williams guilty on all counts. They, of course, have to deliberate for the actual sentencing, and both the victim's family and friends speak, as well as Marcellus's family and his kids and his mother and his grandfather. It took the jury all of 90 minutes. They come back and they sentence him to death. He was sentenced to death for the murder, 30 years for the burglary, life for the robbery, and two 30-year sentences on the armed criminal action, all to be served consecutively. And Marcellus Williams is set to be executed. On December 17th, 2014, the Missouri Supreme Court schedules Marcellus's execution date for January 28th, 2015. Almost immediately, Marcellus's defense team files a motion to have the DNA testing redone. The Innocence Project gets involved, and in comes attorney Trisha Rojo Bushnell. But of course, the federal judge claims that it's frivolous and they dismiss it. Luckily, on January 22nd, 2015, just a week shy of his execution date, the Missouri Supreme Court issues a stay of execution. This actually gave the courts more time to file motions for the additional DNA testing. So after this is done on April 26th, 2017, the courts decide it's frivolous and they once again reschedule Marcellus's execution date, this time for August 22nd, 2017. Now, here's where shit gets real shady. So, after the second execution date was set, Marcellus's defense attorneys file a motion to have the DNA retested because they learned that the DNA found on the murder weapon didn't even match Marcellus at all. You would think that would be enough to prove the petition, but no. The Attorney General, Josh Hawley's office said, we still got enough evidence without the DNA on the knife to convict him. Really? Like, seriously, what evidence do you have? Like, thank God for the governor at that time, Eric Greitens. Hours before the execution was to take place in 2017, he issues a stay of execution. He stated flat out, look, a sentence of death is the ultimate permanent punishment. To carry out the death penalty, the people of Missouri must have confidence in the judgment of guilt. In light of new information, I'm appointing a board of inquiry in this case. This was great because it gives the defense a fighting chance to get Marcellus off. So, for those of you that don't know, the Board of Inquiry is specifically designated for officers when investigating allegations of any type of substandard performance or misconduct. So clearly, the governor agrees there's some funny shit going on with this case. They're finding out about the witness testimony being questionable. They're finding out that the fingerprints on the knife isn't even Marcellus's. They're finding out that the jury selection was real shaky. They are ready. All they need is the Board of Inquiry to confirm it. But then all of a sudden, Governor Grittens resigns, like out of nowhere, completely putting the panel in question. Now, the board consisted of five retired judges who were all supposed to meet the week after. But when Eric resigned, they just decided to cancel their meeting. They assumed that the new governor, Mike Parsons, wouldn't, want them to continue, which was pretty much accurate, unfortunately. Now, while Marcellus is in prison, he becomes the model inmate. He devoted much of his time to studying Islam and writing poetry. He served as the imam for Muslim prisoners at Potosi Correctional Center, and he started being called Brother Khalifa, meaning leader in Arabic. He had an exemplary prison record and was widely respected within the prison community and beyond. On August 24th, 2023, Marcellus and his team they had enough. Marcellus ended up suing Governor Parson and the Attorney General Bailey, citing that his rights were violated by moving to set a new execution date when the investigation hadn't even been completed yet. Like, how are you going to set an execution date when there's still an investigation? So this went on for about a year where the state was trying to determine if they could even allow that to happen. But y'all know how it goes. The lawsuit was seen as baseless and was just dismissed. Like, us admitting that we did a black man wrong? Are you serious? We can't do that. But I mean, are we really surprised? Now here's where shit shakes up. The prosecutor, the new prosecutor, attorney Wesley Bell, he came to Marcellus's aid. He goes and tells his attorney, look, it's a bunch of crazy shit. I don't trust it. I'm going to do what I can to help. So he files a motion to completely vacate Marcellus's conviction altogether. He, along with the Innocence Project, were confident that they could get Marcellus free based on the evidence. And he even said in a statement, he was like, "Look, we're confident that any fair and full process will lead to the inevitable conclusion that Mr. Williams is innocent and his conviction must be overturned." For whatever reason, Governor Parsons waits until June 29th, 2024 to dissolve this board. They hadn't met since 2021, which is crazy to me. If they hadn't met since 2021, why would you wait until 3 years later to dissolve the board? But supposedly, the investigation was still ongoing and the stay of execution was still in place, of course, which was, I guess, a good thing. But once the governor, got the recommendations regarding Marcellus, he lifted that stay of execution quick. Like, can you imagine? Oh my God, can you imagine living day to day, not knowing when your stay of execution is going to be lifted, going every day, waking up every morning, not knowing when your last day is going to be? Thinking everything is okay and that you may have a fighting chance only to have it snatched from you. Well, on June 29th, 2024, that's what happened. The stay of execution was lifted and Governor Parsons came up with the final execution date of September 24th of 2024, and it was set. So, after several months, on July 2nd, 2024, a judge sets a date to consider Attorney Bell's motion to vacate Marcellus's conviction because even though they came up with that date, that motion was still there. But sadly, a week later, the Missouri Supreme Court decides not to reschedule the execution date and that the current date was going to stay. And the Attorney General's office tells the Supreme Court to block Marcellus's innocence hearing. And Andrew Bailey's punk ass, that's the new Attorney General, he argues that a St. Louis County Circuit Court judge doesn't have the authority to reverse a conviction or to overturn it since there was a higher court that set his execution date. But the Supreme Court, they think about it and they think and think and think. Sorry, couldn't help it. And on July 22nd of 2024, they're like, you know what? I can't. We can't do that. We can't do that to this man. He needs fairness somewhere. So they deny the attorney general's request. So in urging the Supreme Court to intervene, Marcellus's lawyers, they asked the justices to wait until they had, decided on another death penalty case that involved this Oklahoma inmate. And they said, hey, this case is similar to that. It's raising the same type of issues, the ever present undercurrent of residual doubt as to, Mr. Williams' innocence plagues this case, even as his execution date looms. They're basically saying, look, y'all have fucked up before. We see that there was a similar case where a man was taken off of death row, where the Innocence Project stepped in and got him free. We think that it's the same with Marcellus. Marcellus's conviction and death sentence were secured through a trial that was riddled with constitutional errors, racism, and bad faith, much of which only came to light recently. His conviction is a grave miscarriage of justice. Executing him would be unthinkable, an irreversible travesty. On August 21st, 2024, the hearing is held, and out of nowhere, Marcellus pleads no contest to the first-degree murder charge. The prosecution tried to argue that the DNA evidence that was going to prove that he was innocent wasn't necessarily factual and it could have been contaminated, yeah, by your own people. So the judge vacates Marcellus's original conviction and Marcellus enters an Alford plea and was given life in prison without the possibility of parole. And if you're asking, okay, what's an Alford plea? I'll tell you. It's a guilty plea in which a defendant maintains their innocence, but they admit that the prosecution's evidence would likely result in a guilty verdict if it was brought to trial. So basically, Marcellus is saying, all right, I am innocent. I know I didn't do this, but I know that the prosecution got enough on my ass to send me to prison and to probably kill my ass. So I'm going to just go ahead and plead guilty so that way I don't die in prison or so that way I'm not executed. And ultimately, it takes him off of death row. And then on top of that, Felicia's own family came forward and they're like, look, we don't want Mr. Williams to be executed. We don't believe in that. Like, literally, you have the victim's own family telling y'all this. So I know y'all are thinking, if he was given life without parole, then how did he end up executed? Just hours after the recommended sentence, the attorney general once again intervened, and the judges just decided, no, we're not going to have that. He can't have the Alfred plea. He can't take that. No. And they rejected. So on August 28th, 2024, a second hearing is held, and they spent about 6 hours questioning Keith Larner. Now, remember, he's the former prosecutor. So they're questioning him about his mishandling of the case and how his fingerprints ended up on the murder weapon. Yes, you heard me right. Why did this fool's fingerprints end up on the murder weapon? Because he admitted that he handled the knife without gloves several times because it was proper protocol at the time. So the prosecutors and Marcellus's defense attorneys, they each spoke for about 2 hours, and they're begging the judge to, like, you've got to set aside Marcellus's execution. And Wesley Bell, he's the current prosecutor. He's reminding everyone of how the St. Louis County Prosecution's Office has a history of excluding black jurors, and that ultimately Marcellus's constitutional rights have been violated. Like, yo, the Keith Larner admitted that not only had he mishandled the knife, which was the murder weapon, but he destroyed the bloody fingerprints that were at the crime scene and removed black jurors based on their race. These are all constitutional errors that undermine the conviction. And Wesley is basically saying, like, hey, this man needs a new trial. They fucked up. We're trying to make this right. Let's fix this. So ultimately, it seems like the prosecution and the defense are, about trying to get justice the right way. But Governor Parson and his little slithering ass sidekick Bailey, the attorney general, they're just about saving face and winning at any cost. And the attorney general actually says, well, the state of Missouri, crime victims for whom the case goes on for decades without resolution, and the criminal justice system are all harmed by endless litigation of meritless claims. And this is where I start to think,
No, you done fucked up, right? No, 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 no. You know you done fucked up, right?
yeah, it wasn't shit about that meritless. Y'all fucked up and you know it. But of course, Attorney General Andrew Bailey wasn't trying to let people know that they had a major fuck up on their hands. So this man files a RIP application blocking the court's ability to rescind the Alfred plea of Marcellus getting life without parole, and ends up leading the circuit court judge to schedule the August 28th evidentiary hearing. He tells them it's in the interest of every Missourian that the rule of law is fought for and upheld every time without fail. Can we say bullshit? Like, it just don't make sense to me. Why are y'all blocking this man so hard? Why not just admit you fucked up? The whole thing is bogus. Let's call it what it is. Mike Parson, you would much rather kill a man than admit, like, hey, we fucked this up. You had opportunity to fix it, but you chose not to. Now, Marcellus is interviewed, and in one of his final interviews, he talks about how he feels about the back and forth with the execution date and his innocence and everything, and how he feels about what's going to happen overall. Y'all take a listen.
Whatever Allah determines, you know what I'm saying, I'm satisfied with it. Whatever, so I already been right there at that moment. And what I'm saying, there's nothing changed about it. I'm still, like I said before, I don't believe in the system, the criminal justice system. I don't believe in it, what I'm saying, to that degree. But I know that it can be used for good as well. So if good come out of it for me and for my family and for all those that's been supporting me, then all praise be to Allah. There's a little supplication that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, he used to say, oh Allah, if life is good for me, then give me life. If death is good for me, then give me death. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I feel. You know what I'm saying? I say the same supplication. So yeah, I'm at peace, of course.
A last-minute clemency request was filed by Trisha Bushnell just days before Marcellus's execution was to happen. Now, remember, Trisha Bushnell is with the Innocence Project. Thousands of people signed the petitions. Attorneys were contacting the governor, pleading, please do not kill this black man. He is innocent. Hashtag Marcellus Williams trended everywhere. The appeal was denied just an hour before his scheduled execution of 6 p.m. Trisha, she condemned the decision of the clemency denial, stating, Missouri is executing an innocent man. That is not justice. And we must all question any system that would allow this to occur. Tonight, we all bear witness to Missouri's grotesque exercise of state power. Let it not be in vain. This should never happen, and we must not let it continue. On September 24th, 2024, Marcellus is prepared for execution. His last meal was chicken wings and tater tots, which he ate at 10:53 a.m. Why in the hell was his last meal so early? Jesus. I'm sorry. That that kind of just struck me as odd. Like, why was it so early in the morning? Like, the fuck? I ain't trying to eat no chicken wings at 11 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, sorry. Okay, I'm back on track. Sorry. Anyway, he had his last meal and he was then visited by Imam Jalahi Kasem from 11:01 a.m. to about 12:32 p.m. The Imam accompanied him to the execution room along with his son Marcellus Jr. His last words were, all praise be to Allah in every situation. Marcellus Williams was executed at 6:10 p.m. at the age of 55 by a lethal dose of pentobarbital on September 24th, 2024 at the Eastern Reception Diagnostic and Correctional Center in Bonne Terre, Missouri. That very same night, Travis Mullis was executed in Texas for killing his 3-month-old son in 2008, marking the third of 5 executions scheduled within a week's time in the U.S. Five executions, y'all, within a week. Marcellus was Missouri's third execution of 2024. Brian Dorsey and David Hosier were executed earlier this year. 9 inmates across the state of Missouri are waiting execution. Christopher Collins is scheduled to be executed on December 3rd for the 2007 rape and murder of a 9-year-old girl in Stella, Missouri. The Missouri Department of Corrections Director Trevor Foley said, we hope this gives finality to a case that has languished for decades. Attorney Wesley Bell, who, had been fighting so hard, was heated, as he should be. He said, this outcome did not serve the interest of justice. Marcellus Williams should be alive today. There were multiple points in the timeline when decisions could have been made that would have spared him the death penalty. If there is even the shadow of a doubt of innocence, the death penalty should never be an option. In a statement following the execution, Marcellus's other attorneys, Lawrence Comp and Lane Cardarella, said, it is hard to explain how admitted racial discrimination is ignored and never meaningfully addressed. It is hard to explain how a prosecutor can admit that he contaminated evidence his entire legal career, including for over a decade after the passage of a DNA statute designated to prevent the contamination of evidence, but nothing is done. The hardest thing to explain, and what we cannot understand, is how the application of a process to protect finality outweighs finding truth and achieving fairness. This case makes you really wonder. It really makes you wonder why. Like, what was the reason for killing this man if so many people were against it, including the victim's family? What is the reason?
Reason.
What was the reason?
I had a reason.
What was the reason?
I had a reason.
What was the reason?
reason? I just explained the reason. What was the reason, bitch? I don't need to explain myself to you. And what was the reason?
After Marcellus's execution, Mike Parsons' spineless ass released a statement where he said that he was following standard practice and that his decisions were not unique to Mr. Williams' case. Yeah, all right, bullshit. A lot of people had a lot of stuff to say. So many people were, just upset and hurt behind Marcellus's execution. Larry Comp made an official statement shortly after, and it said, statement regarding the execution of Khalifa Ibn Rayford Daniels, also known as Marcellus Williams. Khalifa was extraordinary. Never have we met someone like him, and never will we again. We learn a little bit about ourselves with each person we represent. We learned a lot from Imam Khalifa Ibn Rayford Daniels, also known as Marcellus Williams. His faith was so much a part of his identity, and there was always an acknowledgement of regret he expressed in not finding it earlier. While he would readily admit to the wrongs he had done throughout his life, he never wavered in asserting his innocence of the crime for which he was put to death tonight. We also learn about the actors in our justice system. It is hard to explain how admitted racial discrimination is ignored and never meaningfully addressed. It is hard to explain how a prosecutor can admit that he contaminated evidence his entire legal career, including for over a decade after the passage of a DNA statute designed to prevent the contamination of evidence, but nothing is done. The hardest thing to explain, and what we cannot understand, is how rote application of a process to protect finality outweighs finding truth and achieving fairness. The cost is an erosion of public confidence in the system. As public defenders, we are proud defenders of the law. As public defenders, we seek application of the law fairly and equally, not exceptions to the Constitution in the name of expediency or harmless error. We are disappointed how the clemency process unfolded. Ms. Gale's family was utterly ignored in the governor's discussion of why he denied clemency. Also absent from the governor's statement is a discussion of the Board of Inquiry, a body the former governor created because he was troubled by Khalifa's conviction and death sentence. This absence of information supports a conclusion that there must have been some recommendations from the board for a commutation. The truth of this will never likely be disclosed. Transparency is a hallmark of democracy, and it is woefully missing here. To us, Khalifa was an inspiration. We aspire to his level of faith, to his integrity, and to his complete devotion to the people in his life. He was fiercely protective of the people he loved, and he loved deeply. Although we are devastated and in disbelief over what the state has done to an innocent man, we are comforted that he left this world in peace. Khalifa, Jana, peacefully. Insha'Allah. Khalifa's habeas team. The Innocence Project also released a statement saying, tonight, Missouri executed an innocent man. Our hearts are with the family and friends of Marcellus Williams and Felicia Gale, who have suffered unimaginable loss and trauma. Mr. Williams' story echoes that of too many others caught in our country's broken criminal legal system. A black man convicted of killing a white woman, Mr. Williams maintained his innocence until the very end. His conviction was based on the testimony of two eyewitnesses who were paid for their testimony. No DNA evidence linked him to the crime, and the current St. Louis County prosecuting attorney acknowledged that errors made by the trial prosecutors, including mishandling the murder weapon and intentionally excluding Black prospective jurors in violation of the Constitution, contributed to a wrongful conviction. Nonetheless, the Missouri Attorney General's office relentlessly pursued Mr. Williams' execution and opposed clemency. The Attorney General and Missouri Governor Mike Parson, who ultimately denied the request for clemency, ignored the wishes of the victim's husband, who has consistently made clear that he opposed the death penalty for Mr. Williams. We are profoundly grateful to everyone who joined our fight for justice. As United States Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, who, before his appointment to the court, also fought for the lives of Black men condemned to death, once said, America can do better because America has no choice but to do better. So, whatever happened to Henry Cole and Laura Asaro? Well, after Marcellus's convictions, Laura went on to her life. She went on to live her life. She was working at McDonald's as a cashier and a cook. And of course, she went and got her a new little boyfriend, and eventually she got engaged. I'm assuming that she got clean, but around like 2008-ish, she got sick and started suffering from depression, heart conditions, cancer symptoms, high cholesterol, anxiety, high blood pressure, you name it, she had it. She became disabled on May 31st of 2009, or, around that time anyway. She ended up getting fired from McDonald's because she couldn't perform her closing duties because of the pain that she was having in her chest. So she ended up leaving there and started working a part-time position at a school cafeteria from August of 2011 to about May 2012. When the school year ended, she stopped working and she applied for SSI, but was denied. They decided that Laura was able to perform work, but she told them that it was becoming too difficult for her to work because of depression. And she claimed that she was affected by the meanness of her coworkers and the children at the school. And sometimes she would have to leave her station to go and talk to her caseworker so that they could try to calm her down and so that she could take her medicine. And she said that she didn't like taking her medicine while she was at work because it made her confused and, it was messing with her job performance. Laura also claimed that she had meltdowns at work during the school year. And, some of her coworkers would see that she was struggling and, sit with her. And, she was kind of all over the place because she talked about how working took her mind off of her problems. And when she worked, she didn't suffer from depression or anxiety. But then she also talked about she was depressed because she was at work. Made no sense. She talked about how she hated leaving her house because she thought that, something was going to happen and how she didn't want to be homeless again. And she talked about how she didn't want to drive because she thought that she would get into an accident and how she had to be with somebody when she was shopping so that she could feel safe. Okay, y'all see a pattern here? See, I think that this is karma kicking her ass because she was carrying all that shit for all of them years. Like, I'm sorry. I think that Laura Asaro had something to do with this woman's death because the fact that Marcellus came out of nowhere and said that he was selling the laptop on behalf of Laura and Laura was the one to give the cops this information. There was nothing found, no DNA of Marcellus is found on the knife. I'm gonna get into that in a second. I'm about to give some shit away. But I feel like Laura is behind it. Ultimately, she ended up dying February 6th, 2019. Henry Cole also passed away. The irony is his family came forward and said that he had a history of lying to the police and that his story about Marcellus that he gave to the cops was fabricated. Marcellus's other attorneys argued that both informants stood to benefit from their cooperation with the prosecutors and that their stories somehow, would change all the time or they were conflicted with other details about the killing. Both witnesses are dead, so they can't testify in the new trials. They were flat out liars. Neither of them revealed any information that was, either included in media accounts about the case or already known to the police. Their statements were inconsistent with their own prior statements, with each other's accounts, and with the crime scene evidence, and none of the information that they provided could be verified. Aside from their testimony, the only evidence connecting Marcellus to the crime was Glenn, who said Marcellus sold him the laptop taken from Felicia's home. But even then, he said he was selling it for Laura. So why the hell did no one ever look into Laura? Why did they strike Glenn from saying that on the record? Okay, now here's where I have to speak my piece on things, okay? A lot of things. So y'all better buckle up, all right? Let's talk about the jurors that were struck because they were black by good old Keith Larner. Keith was a major problem, from the jury selection to the mishandling of the murder weapon and getting his own fingerprints on it, by the way, because he handled it barehanded even with him losing fingerprints. Like, come on. There are so many problems and holes in this case. For one, a part of the evidence states that Marcellus took a bus to go rob this woman. But if he took a bus, that means there would be witnesses on the bus, right? They would have seen him, especially since he got back on the bus when he left her house. And if he was so called covered in blood, even though he had this sweater on, he still had blood on the boots and all of that in the backpack. I'm pretty sure a bloody ass black man would have stood out on the bus. Or how about the fact that prosecution originally stated that there were footprints? Well, if there were footprints, then where were the shoes to match these footprints? Hmm. Then there's something else that doesn't make sense to me. If he took a bus and was bloody, got back in the Buick, and picked up Laura in his grandfather's Buick, why wasn't there blood in the Buick or on the purse or the laptop? How did she not see any of this? Oh, and let's talk about the clothes that he had on that were thrown into some mysterious drain, but nobody ever found them. So, how are y'all going to link him to that if it was never found? How can y'all prove that? Y'all are just going based off of what Laura says. Then they tried to say that the reason why his DNA wasn't on the knife is because he was wearing gloves. So, with all of this, it sounds like you have no matter of fact proof that he did it. And besides mishandling evidence, Williams' attorneys were adamant that Keith Larner's testimony helped prove that he struck six of seven black potential jurors from the original jury pool due to their race, leaving one black member on an otherwise all white jury, thus denying William a chance to be tried before a jury of his peers. Y'all, this is Missouri. Race has always had a twisted history when it comes to the death penalty. Black people are disproportionately executed, 38 of 99 in Missouri, over three times the statewide population. And while African Americans have been about 60% of murder victims in the state of Missouri over the past 5 decades, 78 of the 99, 78% people were executed because of murdering white victims. That's just a little FYI, by the way. You got seven black people and you only selected one juror you actually dismissed because of his attire and jewelry, and you said that it made him look liberal. Specifically, this man had two earrings in his left ear and an orange shirt on that had some Arabic writing on it. He had a gold cross that Larner claimed was ostentatious looking, and he had the same kind of glasses and the same piercing eyes as Marcellus. This is what Larner literally said on the stand. He said that this man reminded him of Marcellus. What? So because he's not dressed in a business suit, you correlate him with looking like Marcellus. Oh, okay. And because of his job, he's a mail processing supervisor, which is a patronage job, and Larner felt like he was too liberal working at the post office in any capacity. Make that shit make sense. Then another black person was struck from the jury because he was not strong on the death penalty. He was like, he didn't really see the difference between life imprisonment and death. And because he was convicted in a court martial of taking money, he claimed that he had not taken. Larner was like, well, how am I going to convince someone to vote for the death penalty when they think that life without parole is worse or just as bad? I think that's a cop out so that they don't have to face the death penalty as an option. Also, in 1988, he was found guilty in a court martial in the Army. He did 48 days in jail for wrongful appropriation of government funds. He said that his attorney convinced him to plead guilty when he didn't steal the money. And there again, he's charged with a crime that he didn't commit. This is himself. And he said the evidence was there, but he didn't commit the crime, so he pled guilty. Why would he plead guilty if he didn't commit the crime? Seriously? Like, I don't. This man literally said, I wouldn't want to take the chance of having a juror when I'm unsure of the law under any circumstances that might have a felony conviction. Really? Then another black man was dismissed because he kept his arms folded while he was interviewed. Are you fucking kidding me? He kept his arms folded while he was interviewed. What kind of stupid shit? He supposedly got mad when he was questioned about losing his job and people laughed at him. And they said that he was fired for fighting, which, according to Larner, meant that he couldn't make a justified decision about another man. You embarrassed this man in front of his peers, talking about a fight that he had and didn't give him opportunity to explain himself, but rather you put him on display for everyone else to laugh at like it was a joke. You pushed him to be this irate person, and then when he becomes irate, you're like, oh no, he's too violent. What the fuck? Marcellus's clemency petition focused heavily on how Felicia's own relatives wanted Marcellus's sentence commuted to life without the possibility of parole. Wesley Bell even said, even for those who disagree on the death penalty, when there is a shadow of a doubt of any defendant's guilt, the irreversible punishment of execution should not be an option. Meaning, hey, if you feel like there is something wrong with this, execution is not the answer. As the St. Louis County prosecutor, our office has questions about Marcellus's guilt, but also about the integrity of his conviction. But again, you're going against Mike Parson, a governor who was a former county sheriff and one who has not granted clemency for any capital punishment case during his entire tenure as the state's chief executive. And the thing that's really bugging me is that the witnesses that were the key in this case were a cellmate. Granted, it was his cousin, but a cellmate that he did time with who had a history of lying, a history of drug usage. And then his girlfriend, a fucking prostitute who was always trying to get her next fix, who was always trying to get out of some shit, who admitted to only saying anything to try not to go to jail, and they were both paid. There was a $10,000 reward for this man, for the murderer. Henry flat out asked about the reward, and both of them had the most inconsistent stories that kept changing every time that they spoke with the cops. Mike Parsons' ass is talking about, oh, they gave information that no one else knew about, so that's why we believe them. Bullshit. Maybe you and the prosecution coached them and told them what to say because nobody else was there. Or like I said, what I really think is that Laura had something to do with it. Honestly, I think she was behind it and Marcellus got caught up in the shit. Because let's check this. Fact. The fingerprints that were on the wall and the fingerprints that were on Felicia's body did not match Marcellus's. Fact. The hair that was in Felicia's hand from whoever it was that attacked her did not match Marcellus's. This is 1998, so DNA evidence and testing was a lot further along than it used to be back in the day, okay? Fact. The very county prosecutors that put Marcellus away later turned around along with his attorneys and said that he was likely the one that didn't do it. The own prosecutor turned around and said, yeah, you know what? I might have been wrong. And then they filed the motion to vacate his death sentence. This came to existence 7 years ago, but the governor didn't care. He just wanted to see another black man dead. Fact. The day of the murder, 2 neighbors recalled seeing a dark colored minivan driven by a white man. Newsflash, y'all, Marcellus is black. Fact. The only reason that the police had any leeway is because 2 criminals came forward and said, oh, he did it. 2 criminals that ain't no different than Marcellus. But somehow they were placed on a higher pedestal, like make that make sense. They didn't witness it. They didn't see him do it. They just said he did it and the cops went with it. 5 different that was at least 5 that I just spat off. 5 actual facts about this that proved Marcellus's innocence. Like, come on. Whew. All right. I want to end this episode with a poem that Marcellus Williams wrote. It's called The Superman Syndrome. Never wrote a poem about my father. Although near, he wasn't around, so why bother? Papa was a true rolling stone. Maybe the Vietnam War cut too deeply and distorted his view of his own. So forgiving is my heart, I have forgotten much, but clearly remember a beating as our first embrace, our first touch. Some may diagnose it, dissociative experience due to me not viewing this bond as traumatic. Even the use of bonding, too many will be enigmatic. Now behold, here is my father, the first superhero type. Never knew at the time he would just be a stereotype. Still, my heart keeps to forgiveness because I can see past the world's flesh. No tears were shed growing up due to being born with no regrets. Firstborn, I am here adding to his malfunction. I can only remember a yellow dump truck, a bomb pop, and a croquet set with instructions. But when I say he's a master carpenter, I feel a sense of his worth. Then I realize I was never taught such. Abandonment attempts to surface along with shame and hurt. These are just illusions, deceptions, and whispers. Believe me, devils are real. I can hear the hissing, but I ignore them, no doubt, when they spew their fiction. Alcohol addiction, a player in this game. How can one be cured from a disease that eases pain? Writing a poem about my father brought up feelings I never knew I had. Growing up, I never thought of him, so I felt nothing. And even now, it's hard to consider it sad. Now, come on and tell me that you understand how kryptonite can be one's children, so he forgo the part of being a man. The truth is that I know that many can relate. Not so the rectification of my soul, so I refuse bitterness and I reject hate. Therefore, he still deserves respect and kindness as he is the parent, a divinely prescribed order shunned by many, but for my heart, so necessary and apparent. Rest in power, Marcellus Khalifa Williams. That is all for this week's episode of The Infamous Ones, a true crime podcast. You can follow the show on the various streams on Instagram and TikTok at Infamous One Podcast. And that's a number one, by the way, not spelled out. And you can leave a review there. On Twitter, it's Infamous One Pod, where you can also leave a review. On Facebook, you can join the private discussion group, the Infamous Ones discussion group. Again, let me tell y'all about this discussion group. I kicked a bunch of non active people that were in that group out of there. So if you joined the group, just answer the questions and participate. Like I said, I'd much rather have 10 people that love talking about true crime than 200 or 300 folks that don't do shit but just sit in there and take up space. Call me bougie, whatever. I don't care. Oh well. I had a page for people to friend request, but apparently Facebook decided to shut it down. So yeah, I don't know. The show streams on multiple streaming services like Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and so on and so on. So, leave a review. It only takes a few seconds. The reviews matter, people. And of course, got to give y'all some of the reviews that I had. This one comes from Spotify. It's from Cat Eyes and it's on the Leicester Street Massacre episode. It says, "Great episode. This man is insane. And the fact that he's continuing to avoid the death penalty after taking 6 lives is insane. He tried to behave to get insanity, but he knew exactly what he was doing. I pray those people are resting peacefully." Yeah, that episode was crazy. Like, I was still laughing at the kitchen crypt thing, but that yeah, dude was nuts. And I feel like now that's a case where the death penalty should apply for sure. The next one actually came from Audible from Lernia Marie. And it says, "My first time, but definitely not my last. OMG, I don't know what I was expecting, but this was great. The storytelling was informative and entertaining. Note to self, don't listen to this podcast in public. I was literally laughing out loud in the middle of the grocery store. You definitely have a new fan. Girl, get your laugh on in the middle of the grocery store. Listen, I listen to podcast episodes when I be in the store making groceries. So get your giggle on, honey. Laugh out loud. That's what you're supposed to do. I'm glad that I'm entertaining." Oh, and for the first time, I got a review in my email. Now, it didn't have a name, but it says, "I am 69 and never really listened to podcasts. I came across yours and love it. You are so entertaining. Not only do you provide all the important details, but do it in an entertaining way. I grew up in Los Angeles and can relate. I've tried to leave you a review, but can't find how to do it. Plus, looked for you in Facebook and again, can't find you." All right, so this is what I was thinking about doing. What I'm probably going to do is create a public Facebook group where people can just specifically leave reviews, or, like I said, you can continue to, email, Instagram, X, Facebook, TikTok, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, however you listen to it, leave a review there. Okay. If you want to support the show, or if you're feeling the spirit, meaning that liquor, there's something in this liquor, or rather this wine, click the link at the bottom of the screen from whatever app you're listening to this episode on and hit listener support to subscribe. The subscriptions are like 99 cents, and they give you access to stuff that the listeners don't get from behind the scenes, and all that good stuff. Again, I am doing merch. You can find out information about the merch by joining the private Facebook discussion group, Infamous Ones discussion group. If you want to donate, you can do that as well via the Cash App at Infamous One Pod. That's $INFAMOUSONEPOD. Donations do go toward new recording equipment. Listen, people, I got to get a new mic because damn. But y'all can always donate to the snack fund if you want to. And shout out to my popcorn donators. Y'all know y'all are freaking awesome. I got to check that Cash App because apparently Cash App is closing accounts left and right. I don't know what y'all did to piss Cash App off. I don't know if it's got something to do with this little settlement thing, but they are shutting down accounts, baby. Okay. But they didn't shut me down. So again, that's $INFAMOUSONEPOD. If you have a case that you want to hear more on, that you feel has been ignored in the Black community, if you want to inquire about ad space, or if you want to leave a review, or simply just be like, hey girl, hey, send an email to infamous1pod@gmail.com. That's INFAMOUSONEPOD@gmail.com. Once again, people, please share, share, share. This podcast is so dope. We are in season 2, bitches. And that's some really big shit. So keep sharing, y'all. Until then, y'all know what it is. I'm your girl Kay. Thank you for tuning in. And I will see y'all next week, I promise, with a new episode. Peace.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Infamous Ones, a true crime podcast hosted by Kay. Be sure to like and comment on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe so that you never miss an episode.